right, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our virtual lunch and learn today. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy out there. Before we get to our presentation, I want to mention a couple of upcoming events we have. We have a few virtual group fitness classes. Our instructors are leading them via Zoom from their own homes. We have about 5 throughout the week going on, and you can find them all and register on Link to Health. We have a 5-week online health athlete program starting on April 8th. Also starting on April 8th is another virtual session for 8 weeks about staying calm and well in the midst of the coronavirus storm. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please just type them into the chat box and we will get to the end. We'll get to them at the end. I would now like to introduce our speaker. Jackie Buell practices as a sports dietitian at the Jamison Crane Sports Medicine Center. Her primary academic appointment is in the School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences. Jackie has a formal background in athletic training and exercise science, as well as nutrition. Her research expertise is in the area of body composition and bone density in athletes. Please welcome Jackie Buell.
Thank you, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here. I hope to be able to give you a presentation that you can at least pick up a few pearls of things that are new. As you can tell, I'm waving my hands a little bit standing here. Please notice that when I teach in the classroom, I walk around everywhere, and that's part of what helps me keep kind of my level of animation up. So I'll probably walk around. I'll probably leave you looking at this window for a little bit. Feel free to mute that piece if you want to. I will say first, welcome to National Nutrition Month. That's part of the reason we're doing this in March, is this is National Nutrition Month. Funny enough, as you know, I'm also an athletic trainer, and it's National Athletic Training Month. So welcome to both of those. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and move through the slides that I've prepared for you guys, just kind of as our basis of conversation. Again, I hope not to get too monotone. I know it's easy when you're recording things to get a little monotone, so we'll move through it. So they wanted me to provide you guys with some objectives and kind of give some direction to my talk. And so as you can read for yourselves here, we're going to talk about how much energy you need, as well as how you might parse that to your macronutrients. You hear a lot of people say they're eating by their macros. You know, what does that mean? And I'm going to show you how to set your own macros if you would like to. As well, I want you to realize that so much of our body relies on our genetic load. So towards the end, we'll talk about some chronic diseases. And I hope you realize that your genetic load is a big part of that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about where you might find some resources on campus if you want some further help and direction. So if we start talking about energy balance, I think most people know that your calories in need to match your calories out in order to be in balance, in order to maintain your weight. When you eat too much, you gain weight. When you eat too little, you lose weight. Having said that, it's not really the case for everybody. So each person kind of has their own individual metabolism. I certainly know plenty of fairly thin folks who tell you that it doesn't matter how much they eat, they still can't gain weight. I know plenty of heavy folks who say it doesn't matter how little I eat, I still can't lose weight. And so we want to talk about these kinds of things today. It is important to have a little bit of an energy deficit to lose weight. What I see most in my clinical practice are people trying to restrict calories way too far. They come to see me because they're upset they're not losing weight. They don't understand. They've done all this research online. You know, Dr. Google might be one of our public enemies, just saying, because you can find so much information out there that sometimes is legit and sometimes it's not. That's the other thing I want to do today, is provide you with what I consider to be some legit resources for this kind of stuff, okay? But you need to be really intentional about your energy balance, is what I'm trying to get at with this. And you want to be sure that you're kind of spot on to what you need to be doing with your body. Okay, so you don't always want to be bottom siding it. You don't want to be under eating so much all the time that your body can't do good. And you don't want to be overeating so much all the time that your body can't do good. And so when we look at what kind of energy does each of us need, it depends on a number of factors here. And so when we look at a person's age, the older we get, the fewer calories we need. The younger a person, the more they need to support growth and their physical activity. And then as we hit adulthood, where we stop growing, we kind of level off for a while. probably in our 30s and 40s, we start to go downhill, and then we hit our 50s, along with change of life issues. As your age decreases, so do your calorie needs. So as well, gender, if I'm going to calculate energy needs on a person, I'm going to use a different equation for men versus women. And again, age comes into that as in terms of different equations. We usually use a person's height, their weight, and their gender to do these calculations. So again, some people have a really fast metabolism. Some people have a slower metabolism. We'll talk about that. And you want to be intentional about what you're doing. One of the things I want to capture with a person when I'm interviewing them is how much training are you doing? You know, I can calculate, I can just lay down some general calorie needs for females by age if I want to, but if I really want to be specific and help them reach their goals, then I want to know what is their training volume if they're doing exercise. So I will often talk about exercise and training volume. My background in training is sports nutrition. Doesn't mean I can't help people in general, but it means that of course my language is loaded with that. Okay, so this is a machine, the Core, K-O-R-R, Core Resting Metabolic Rate Machine that we use there in the lab. And this allows us, and in the labs over in the Jamison Crane Sports Medicine Center, and a person sits in a chair or on my IDEXA machine just like this and relaxes. And we relax them for a good 15 minutes if we've got time to be sure that they kind of come down to resting. And then this, I'm pretty sure you can see my cursor moving. This little piece that goes in their mouth is where they breathe. They've got a little clip on their nose, and they inhale from the ambient air out here. And when they exhale, that volume of air goes through the machine, and it estimates how much oxygen is that person taking out of the air. Therefore, how many calories are they burning? Okay, so the whole idea of this resting metabolic rate is that you can be relaxed and not influenced on anything that jacks up your metabolism that day. So just for that reason, these aren't always as, they're not always as accurate as we would like them to be. But nonetheless, this is how we measure it in the lab. Now, there are a number of different machines that are out there. Another one that's fairly common, and I think some folks on our campus have it as well, is the MedGem. And it's just a little handheld that's about as big as what I'm holding right here that you plug in the same way and you breathe just through that handheld. We think that these tabletop models are probably plus or minus 10% in terms of their accuracy. I think you can probably get plus or minus 10% with some of the equations. So when people say, is it worth my while to have this RMR test done? Well, sure. If you feel like you want to have it done just to see what it says, we actually offer this for $25 in the clinic, but I'm only going to do them first thing in the morning because I want them to be fairly accurate. The person gets up, they're welcome to brush their teeth, of course, and a little bit of water to go with that. Other than that, no coffee, no tea, no cigarettes, no smoking, nothing that amps up your resting metabolic rate. You want to come and get on the machine so you get a fairly accurate recording. I would say that if I test, I'll say 20 people, maybe I find one or two who have a significantly low metabolism. So it's really not a very big number. And there's some research around that as well, but that's been my experience clinically. So if we want to predict your energy needs without using the machine to do it with, this is what we're going to do. We would use a prediction calculator, if you will. There are prediction equations. The two that I use most frequently are the Harris-Benedict and the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation. The Harris-Benedict is one that I use for most folks who don't have any metabolic issues or they're not morbidly obese. I will go ahead and use Harris-Benedict for them. Even the athletes I work with, I often will use this Harris-Benedict. There are probably 3 or 4 different equations you could use for athletes, but in my experience, they're not much different than this Harris-Benedict. So I've got a little Harris-Benedict Excel spreadsheet built for myself that I can calculate people's calorie levels. On that same spreadsheet, I've got the ability to look at the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation. Mifflin-St. Jeor, and all of these are named after the folks, of course, they're named after the folks who put the equations together. But the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation is particularly helpful for folks who are overweight or they've bounced their weight up and down a number of times. Maybe they've got just a little bit of metabolic damage from doing that. The Mifflin-St. Jeor is a more cautious equation. So if you want to be sure that your calculations aren't overfeeding you, then use Mifflin-St. Jeor. That's fine. So I'm not really going to share these equations per se with you. They're available online. You can find them. What I do want you to see is how this DRI equation works, and I've put in a different slide to help you see that today. But let's say that you've gone ahead and you've run the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation on yourself. That represents your resting metabolic rate. I often get the question, well, how is BMR, basal metabolic rate, different from my resting metabolic rate? In nutrition, we really talk about them as if they're the same. The true difference would be your basal metabolic rate would have to be a situation where you were fasted overnight, you're laying in a bed in a place like our Center for Translational Research. They've got a hood that when you wake up, the hood's over your head. That hood doesn't let any air escape, and you barely wake up. You're at a point of being awake without thinking about anything, and you're just laying there. How much oxygen do you use? That would be more like a BMR. That's just not practical in a clinical setting, really. We might try it for some research and stuff like that. But so RMR really describes just this resting. By the time you get to my lab to have an RMR test done, you have survived 315 traffic that morning, which means what? You're a little amped up typically, right? So there's almost no way to not have some sense of stimulus about yourself by the time you get there. So anyway, we find that RMR number, whether you do it by equation or measurement, and then we have to put to it a physical activity factor. And so this is where how much do you exercise kind of comes into it. If you're really not doing much exercise, then you can use this physical activity factor of a 1.3. And when I say use a physical activity factor of 1.3, you find your resting metabolic rate, and I'm showing you down here. If your resting metabolic rate's 1250, then you multiply that by this factor, this physical activity factor of 1.3, and it gives you about 1625 calories. Okay, so a resting metabolic rate of 1250 is not a very large person, and 1.3 is what I use when somebody is sedentary. I do have colleagues that will use a 1.2 when somebody's trying to lose weight as their physical activity factor. That's fine, but you're in the ballpark. The point is, your resting metabolic rate is not the number of calories you should consume. Anytime you're consuming fewer calories than what your body needs, you're asking for your body to kind of bring it in a little bit and not have as fast a metabolism at different points in time. So let me define for you a physical activity level of moderate activity would be a person who's getting to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, an hour at a time, getting some pretty good workouts in there, cardiovascular, hopefully doing a little weight training as well. If we've got an athlete who's doing practice 5 or 6 days a week, or maybe practice 4 days, game a couple days, I'll usually just use a 1.5 on them. I don't see too many athletes that are your adult athletes who are trying to gain a lot of weight, right? So I don't want to overfeed them. If I see an adolescent, a young person who's done growing, so I'm not going to use the adolescent equation, but I might use the adult equation. I might look at 1.7 or 1.9 for that kid's physical activity level to be sure I'm feeding them enough. These tall, thin drink of water athletes are the ones that do want to gain weight. So you got to be sure that you're kind of feeding them enough. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it on a spreadsheet. I'm taking into consideration everything the person has said to me and trying to kind of get at what is our best guess at what the calorie intake should be. Okay, and I hope it really personalizes for people what their calorie level should be. Now, yeah, you heard me say best guess. It sounds pretty scientific when you put all these numbers in the machine and it spits a number out, but not everybody has a calorie as a calorie. I know plenty of women who tell me that I gain weight on 1,000 calories a day. It's like, wow, that shouldn't be the case for anybody. I have men who are not that big and they're fairly thin, and then they say, I can't gain weight eating 5,000 calories a day. A calorie is not a calorie for those particular people. So we have to find a good starting point that's kind of our best guess and then monitor from there and see how people do. This is me kind of getting back to that calculator, the DRI calculator. The DRI calculator are the dietary recommended intakes, right? And so you can go to this USDA website and you can see on the left-hand side, I've just put a picture of this in for you guys to see, but there's all kinds of dietary guidance and different things that you can learn from this website. But in the main frame of this particular page, you can see that it's got the DRI calculator for healthcare professionals. You can get on there and enter all of your information. It already accounts, as I point down here, it already accounts for your activity level. It will give you an estimation of how many calories you need. And so I think that's a really useful tool. And you don't have to have an account as a healthcare provider or anything like that to reach that. They just want people to use this under guidance of a professional. Okay, so we take into account your body goals. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. If you want to lose body fat, most people come to me and they say, I want to lose weight. And I say, okay, what kind of weight do you want to lose? And they look at me like, weight on the scale. And I'm like, oh, do you want to lose fat weight? Do you want to lose lean mass? Oh, no, of course I want to lose fat. But they've already said they think losing weight means losing fat. For people who are losing a fair amount of weight, often they'll lose about 3 pounds of fat to 1 pound of lean in just that ratio. So we've got to be careful about how much we underfeed them, because the more you underfeed them, chances are the more lean mass they'll lose. I want you guys to realize that as we age, it gets easier and easier to lose lean mass. So we don't want to speed up that process by trying to lose weight, okay? So I usually will try to get them at about 300, maybe 500 at most calories under what their body needs. The only caveat I will throw out there to that is when the person only needs 1,600 calories, man, I refuse to write a meal plan for 1,400 or below. I want people to eat enough. Let's make that difference by exercise, right? I want them to keep their lean mass. I want them to get enough nutrients in their diet. We got to eat enough food to do that, okay? So if somebody wants to increase their strength, then of course you've got to eat like you want to increase your strength. You cannot be eating, let's take a man who needs 2,500 calories a day, who's trying to eat 1,800. His ability to gain strength is really going to be limited because he's not eating enough calories for it. Whereas if we had that guy at 2,250 calories, working hard in the gym, now maybe he can add some lean mass at the same time he's cutting a little bit of weight. It is possible to lose some fat, gain some lean. It is not true that we turn fat into lean mass. Okay, they're two very separate topics, and your calories need to be in about the right place for that to happen. So when you're trying to lose weight, I want you to think about protecting your metabolism. And a lot of people say, what do you mean by protecting your metabolism? I want to keep that metabolism moving throughout the day. Okay, and I often in person do this little, I'll call it kind of almost a little skit. I hope it is the same online, but talking about women who are trying to lose weight. And certainly men can be this way too. It's just common that it's a female that comes to me and they say, okay, so I eat breakfast because my mom always taught me that the most important meal of the day was to eat breakfast. And people who are telling me to lose weight tell me to eat breakfast. So I eat breakfast, and by breakfast, they mean I have a bowl of oatmeal, maybe it has some berries in it, and I have a boiled egg. To me, that's not much of a breakfast, but that's what this fictitious person's having. So then the middle of the afternoon, somebody has brought in some kind of donuts or cookies or something like that to the office. This person's dieting. They say, no, I'm not going to have any of that. I'm going to wait until lunchtime. Lunchtime comes, that same person says, I'm going to have a salad because I know I can put some lean protein on that salad. I can put all these veggies on it, no dressing, because I don't want to consume the calories. Right? I'll just have chicken on top of my salad, and a dry salad maybe with just a little oil, vinegar, or whatever. So middle of the afternoon comes, they walk past the candy machine. They're just as hungry as you get because they haven't eaten much all day, right? They get home for dinner, and if they happen to be the person who cooks dinner, they are nibbling all over everything that doesn't move in the kitchen because they're so doggone hungry. Let me act like your metabolism, micro metabolism, if you will, in a similar situation. So in the morning, your metabolism says, all right, we got a little bit of food. We're doing good. Get yourself moving, right? We can do all the things we need to do today. It gets to be 10 o'clock. There's no snack coming in. Your body says, oh, we better slow down. And this person's hungry at this point. They know it, but nope, we're going to be good, right? They get the lunch. They feel good because they're having a little bit of lunch, but they still realize up here that they've restricted themselves, right? Their metabolism's like, guys, all we're getting is chicken. Really, it's all we're getting. Slow down. Middle of the afternoon, not getting anything. Late day, not getting anything. And then all of a sudden, this person goes, wham, feed it up. They give you all this food. What's your body going to do with all those extra calories at that point? Yeah, it's going to store them, right? So instead of falling off the wagon and eating so much at night, why don't we back up? Why don't we design a diet that has us eating across the day so we don't get so doggone hungry? When you can suppress a person's appetite a little bit is when they're going to be able to keep their calories down a little better, right? I like to use fat in the diet and protein in the diet to help keep the hunger at bay. So we're going to eat protein throughout the day is going to be a piece of where I'm going with this, okay? So you got to eat to fuel yourself. I like people to kind of eat across the day if they will, not necessarily eating all the time, but in some very distinct 3 meals, couple of snacks, making sure that our protein's high. So no meal skipping, no really low calorie diets, unless you're part of a medically approved, physician supervised program, and then have at it. That's what you're paying to have done at that point, right? But I don't believe that those do us any good in terms of keeping our lean mass and just losing fat mass, okay? In fact, let's think about it like this. I have a couple little scenarios I like to talk about here. If I get upset with my body and I think I want to lose weight, I go on a crash diet to lose that weight. When I lose that weight, I lose fat mass and a little bit of lean mass. Okay, I'm done losing weight, feeling pretty good. I go back to my old eating habits. What do you know? Next thing you know, boom, I'm right back up to my weight, maybe a little bit more. When I gain back, it's rare that I'm doing something to gain back muscle at the same time I gain back fat, right? So every time I lose lean, lose fat, then I gain fat. Lose lean, lose fat, gain fat. You get where I'm going? Over time, you actually become fatter and fatter from that kind of behavior. And I wholeheartedly believe that I see this quite a bit in my practice. And most people who are in this situation will go, yep, that's right. That's exactly how it feels. So let's stop that big low calorie dieting and try to get ourselves on a meal plan that helps us whittle back over time. We also know from the research literature that people that lose weight slower are more apt to keep it off than people who lose weight quickly. And so even though it was spring break time and then people in February wanted to lose XYZ pounds by spring break, not a good idea to try to cram that all in. Let's get that meal plan on there, okay? So I imagine I'm flying along talking about this stuff. I imagine some of you have questions, and again, we're glad to take those at the end. So I do get a few people who want to gain weight, and I have a few things to say here. On my last slide, I meant to make a comment about how deprived people make themselves feel when they're dieting, right? That gal didn't let herself have donuts. She didn't let herself have salad dressing or chickpeas or anything else greatly nutrition on her salad. She didn't let herself have an afternoon snack. So no wonder by the middle of the afternoon, she's feeling a little bit abused. And when we feel a little bit abused, what's that mean? Overeating becomes easier, right? You know, you should never hear somebody say, wow, you're looking a little heavy these days. You ought to cut down on what you're eating. Although these people who are really thin, they will often get comments of, you are looking pretty thin. You need to eat more. What makes people believe that they can comment to one person's body and not the other person's body? Why are we talking to people about their vehicles, about their bodies? Right? People who are really thin, who've worked hard to try to gain weight, are equally as offended as the people who are heavy, who would like to lose weight. So you got to be careful what you're saying to folks as part of what I wanted to comment on both of these. Okay. So if I go back a slide, have a look at what these bullet points look like. Eating every few hours, eating to fuel yourself, anything to stimulate your muscles, eating every few hours, eating to fuel yourself, anything to stimulate your muscles. No meal skipping, trying to be about 300 to 500 calories different on this weight gain slide, right? They really look similar to how much, it's a matter of how much you're eating each time. What's your overall calorie goal set at, and how much are you eating each time? You see, when people want to gain weight, I don't want them to eat 1,500 calories in one sitting. That's going to help you gain all weight. It's not going to help you gain lean. It's going to help you gain more fat, right? And so we want to spread that out throughout the day if we want to gain consistently. Okay, so the last bullet point on there then is nothing magical about over-consuming protein. So I want this to move us kind of into our protein needs section of my presentation. So now we're going to talk about macros, okay? Before we move on to macros, let me say that our body types are highly heritable, meaning if you're obese, your offspring has a higher chance of becoming obese. If parents are thin, the offspring has a higher chance of being thin. Especially when I'm working with young males who are thin and they just want to grow and put on more lean mass and want their testosterone to be there, I often say, yeah, what was your biological father, mother's growth pattern? Because oftentimes those are fairly heritable as well, okay? So inheritance is a big thing there. Okay, so with protein needs, the RDA, the recommended dietary daily intake, is 0.8 grams per kilogram. If you really want to use the grams per kilogram, that's what I use in clinical practice to find these macros, right? You take your body weight in pounds, divide it by 2.2, that gives you your number of kilograms that you weigh. So instead of just presenting it like that, I went ahead and rounded some numbers to show you that 0.8 grams per kilogram is a little less than 0.4 grams per pound, okay? And so if I had a 170-pound person, I multiply pounds by that factor of 0.4, and it gives me 68 grams a day for the RDA. Well, the RDA was designed to keep most healthy people out of malnutrition, out of protein starvation, okay? It is not necessarily the same as what a lot of us are seeing as optimal protein intake. And so working with athletes, and you can see my second bullet point, in the sports world, we're using 1.7 grams per kilogram in most settings as the top number of grams per kilogram protein an athlete can use to build muscle. If you have somebody who's young and they are still growing longitudinally, still getting taller as well as putting on muscle mass, that number might go a little bit higher. But in general, I don't think I ever use anything above about 2.2. I know some of my friends who are doing other kinds of diet manipulations will sometimes use up to 2.4 grams per kilogram. I think the American Strength Coaches Association says 2.4. You don't hear much higher than that, okay? But let's say that this 1.7 is what we're trying to get at. The 1.7 grams per kilogram would be about 0.8 grams per pound. And in that case, this 170-pound person would need about 132, you see? So about double of what the RDA is. And this is what a lot of folks, especially in the sports world, are considering optimal. I will also mention that for weight loss, any weight-restricted diet, you want that protein to be a little bit higher to try to keep people from losing their lean mass, to try to stimulate that lean mass and have plenty for that, okay? So as we age, there's a lot of focus on sarcopenia, which means muscle loss over time, right? So sarcopenic obesity is that person who's lost muscle mass over time, yet they still weigh what they used to. And it puts you in a hard place. You're not able to get around as well as you used to because you don't have the muscle mass to help you with that. So we want our older population to have a little bit more protein as well. And again, this 1.7 is adequate for anybody. I think the last number I saw on males in their 50s was it took at least 1.5 grams per kilogram protein for them to maintain their muscle mass, okay? So we want protein-centric meals is a big deal right now. Talking about splitting your protein up into small snippets throughout the day and depending on your body size, but for an average sized person, 20 to 30 grams per meal, depending again on body size. If you're a really large guy, then maybe that number becomes 30 or 35. But taking in more than 45 or 50 grams in any one setting is really kind of wasting that protein. What you'd rather do, let's say it's a protein drink that you're using for exercise recovery, then drink half of it now and drink half of it as part of a snack later or something like that, okay? Don't waste that protein. It's pretty expensive. So again, these protein foods that I want you to realize, milk or dairy products, meat, cheese, eggs, beans, these are the kinds of things, of course, that have protein in them. I anticipate we're going to get some comments later about the difference in plant-based and animal-based proteins. Animal-based proteins have all of the essential amino acids that our bodies need. You can still get those in plant-based proteins. You just want to eat a wide variety of plant-based proteins in order to get that. So you don't want to live on rice alone for a long period of time. And I hope there are no vegetarians doing that anyway, okay? But that's the deal with animal proteins being a better quality protein, if you will, than plant-based. Plant-based proteins have an added benefit of being full of antioxidants. And so depending on what's going on with you, you might want to think about making some more of your proteins plant-based as well. And again, I'll take any questions relative to that as we get to it. So we need to personalize this protein idea, just like we've personalized the calorie stuff. So if you've got kidney disease or liver issues, I want you to be careful about just jacking your protein up. You need to talk with your physician, your nurse practitioner, about how much protein they think your body can do, or meet with a dietitian and let them think with you about that. We have dietitians who do nothing but kidney and liver disease kinds of things. Let them help you with it. But again, I had a fellow a few years ago that had kidney disease. He was a firefighter, so he's got some athlete needs. As he's trying to keep his lean mass, I started doing the research of how much protein am I able to let him have, if you will, in his diet. Took it up with his physician, and the physician was fine with the 1.7 level that I really wanted him to have. That's not you, that's him. So make sure you talk to your practitioner about how much protein they feel is too much. And again, a dietitian can help you with that too, okay? If you're a healthy person, you don't have kidney disease, you don't have any liver issues, there is no evidence showing us that high protein diets harm our kidneys or liver, okay, in healthy people. So I've even seen studies where people are doing 3 or 4 grams per kilogram, and they'll do it over a period of time, and they'll show you all their liver markers and their kidney markers, and everything looks just fine. There are studies on athletes, 2 years, a little bit longer, a basketball study that I saw, and it's showing that there's no harm done for somebody that's got healthy kidney and livers. Okay, so it is intuitive for those of you that are healthcare practitioners. The way we break protein down in our body is in our liver, and then we get rid of it through our kidneys. Get rid of it meaning get rid of the nitrogen that gets deaminated through our kidneys. So it makes sense that eating a high protein diet will stress those systems more. You got to drink a lot of water. It takes a lot of water to flush our system. It takes a lot of water to break protein down. So you go on a high protein diet, you want to be sure that you're on top of your game in terms of hydration as well. Okay. But again, I don't feel like 1.7 grams per kilogram, even up to 2.2 or so, is going to do anybody harm. Let me say this about personalizing your diet, man. If you change what you're doing in your diet and you don't feel well, is that the right diet for your body? Our bodies have great intuition. You just got to listen to it. You got to figure out what's right for you. Okay, that's protein. Let's look at carb needs. And I think this one's even harder. I think protein's straightforward. I call protein my enough is enough nutrient. You want enough, but once you've got enough, that's enough. So there's a range of what we think is good in terms of protein. Carbohydrate depends on what your activity level is. Somebody's an athlete, I want them to have quite a bit of carbohydrate to help them stay fueled, okay? People who are diabetic or pre-diabetic, I want them to be careful how much carbohydrate they have, because that's what's potentially going to further their diabetes issue. Okay, so genetics is a big piece of our carb tolerance. In addition, we have a lot of GI issues that people have these days. And some of these are things like celiac disease and stuff like that, where there's somewhat of a genetic component to the autoimmune piece of that, right? And so we get this clustering of autoimmune issues in different families. And so in my opinion, this is where we really need to personalize, okay? So person with diabetes, obesity, GI issues, we all tolerate carbohydrate differently. And by that, I mean, some people can eat the heck out of carbohydrate, have 60, 70% of their diet in carbohydrate and never gain a pound from it. Other people eat that much carbohydrate and they're going to gain quite a bit of weight, even though they might be eating the same calorie level. Okay, so some people are insulin resistant, and that doesn't help them with their issues, right? So we all tolerate carb in terms of our insulin resistance as well as our GI systems. I put it on this slide to remind me to talk about it. Our microbiome is significantly impacted by what we eat. So your microbiome is this idea that we have bacteria, bugs that normally reside in our colon, and their purpose in life is to help us digest different things and extract different nutrients, form the bulk of our feces. We now know that the gut-brain axis, the gut communicates easily with the brain. There are all kinds of things they're coming out with now in terms of microbiome research. People that are struggling to lose weight probably ought to read some of this literature and think about whether or not they want to be on a good probiotic. We talk about prebiotics and probiotics. Probiotics is trying to take the cultures that you want to live there. Prebiotics are trying to feed the cultures that live there, right? So sometimes your probiotic, prebiotic will be together. But a lot of these carbohydrates that we eat are prebiotics, meaning they feed our microbiome. So you don't want to just wipe it out without a good reason to do so. You want to personalize your nutrition from that perspective, okay? The other thing I want to mention here are food addiction issues. There are some great YouTubes out there. Got to be careful, again, what all you believe, but they're good for you to think about, where it shows videos of looking at people's brains when they take sugar into their mouth. And there are people who their brain lights up just as if they were on drugs when they take sugar in their brain. We'll often joke about, I'm a little carb addicted, I'm a little sugar addicted. You know, if you are, you got to start thinking about that, because the added sugars are probably part of what does us the most damage in our diet. So the current DRI for carbohydrates to have at least 130 grams a day, and that's just to support your brain, right? If I have somebody that I think is probably carb intolerant in terms of insulin resistance, I'll probably start them on a normal mixed diet first, and I'll probably have their carbohydrates, depending on their body size, I'm talking about a female, 150, 180 calories, or 180 grams rather of carbohydrate, right? So you want at least 130 if you're trying to eat a normal mixed diet, and then up just a little bit from there is just fine. It has to be that if you're going to get the fruits in that I want you to get. Okay, so when you look at the acceptable macronutrient distribution range set by our federal government, 45 to 65% of your calories is what this should make up, right? Thought it might be good just to throw up here the fiber needs for women as well as for men in grams. You know, it's a good activity for you to try to figure out, am I getting enough fiber in my diet? Especially if your backside's not working the way that you want it to. When you increase protein, when you increase fiber, all those things at the same time, you really got to increase your fluid intake or you're going to be constipated. Okay, so be sure that you're getting your fluids. When I say too much fiber is not a good thing, we think that once a person gets above 50 or 60 grams of fiber in their diet a day, that you have the potential of binding out some of the minerals that you need. We know some of those minerals are attached to the fibers. So we want to be careful about actually getting too much as well. Again, under a physician's guidance, don't worry about this, but trying to give you some general things to personalize your diet with. So I think I've probably talked about a lot of these things under individualizing carbohydrate on that prior slide. And of course, there are different tests that we do for diabetes and pre-diabetes. The one on there that you might not be aware of, I think most of you would know insulin resistance as a word. Most of you would know that your doctor looks at hemoglobin A1C, or that they look at a fasting or a non-fasting blood glucose when they do our biometrics. Having high triglycerides is one of the things I look at in terms of somebody's insulin resistance. We know that folks on a high sugar diet often have higher triglycerides. You can get them back off that sugar a little bit, it'll improve those triglycerides. So you know, even if somebody's not on a high sugar diet, if they're diabetic, their body perceives they're on a high sugar diet, so they're going to have higher triglycerides. So again, you want those triglycerides below about 150. And when those and your hemoglobin A1C is a little high, it's probably time to get worked up for some pre-diabetes or diabetes. I've put on here the low FODMAP diet. This is not something I work with a lot, but I have quite a few folks around me that do. Let me look up, I want to make sure I've got it right. The fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, a lot easier to say FODMAP, but basically a low FODMAP diet means that you're dropping out of your diet some of these complex carbohydrates that you think are causing you to bloat. Okay, and so I'll get a lot of people that say, man, after I eat, I get all this bloating and this uncomfortable, and I'm pointing to my lower intestines right now. You can't see that, but that's about what they're describing. And I like to differentiate. Is your upper stomach hurt or is your lower stomach hurt? And when that lower stomach is what's really bothering them, that's more than likely some of this GI system piece coming into that, right? And so know that a low FODMAP diet is not what we think about when we think microbiome health. So be careful just going on a low FODMAP diet unless you've got a reason to, and then be really intentional about the carbs that are in your diet. They're going to help your microbiome. Okay, so I've got a bullet point here about cutting back on those added sugars. Don't know if you know it, but we have brand new food labels out there these days. And by now, most of them should be in effect. I think the USDA, FDA first put down these guidelines, these new guidelines in 2016. In 2018, they started forcing people to be implemented into them. And then our large manufacturers had to be in them first. And then our smaller manufacturers by January 2020, everybody's supposed to be converted to these new food labels. So on a new food label, it says right on there, it says carbohydrate, meaning total carbohydrate. Often it'll say fiber, and then it'll say sugars. And inset from sugars, it has to say added sugars, right? So you can tell how much is added sugar. Things like milk and yogurt have some sugar in them because of the lactose that's in there, of the sugars that are naturally in that milk. But when they've added a bunch to it on top of that's when you want to pick out that it's an issue. Okay, our body sees sugar as sugar, so don't be taking in a bunch of extra sugar if you can help it. I like to do this little demonstration when I'm in person with folks where we can divide that number by 4 to see the number of teaspoons. So for instance, I have in the lab this little Activia. Wow, I shouldn't say that, should I? I shouldn't poo-poo any products, but let's say I have a yogurt and it's in a green container, so we believe it's healthy. And it's the one that's advertised for good gut health. And so we think, oh, and it's a Greek yogurt, so it's got a little extra protein in it. It must be good for me. I'm going to eat that. When I flip it over and read the label, it's got 32 grams of total carbohydrate in it, right? And mine must be an old label because it doesn't have the added sugars in it yet. But a serving portion like that of yogurt should have about 12 grams of carbohydrate in it. It shouldn't have 32. So 32 minus the 12, that's complex carbohydrate, or that's not added to it, is 20. Divide that by 4, that's how many teaspoons of sugar are added to that product. Get your little sugar bowl and your teaspoon out and count it out for yourself. When in the world would you ever put 5 teaspoons of sugar in your yogurt? Ooh, okay? So might be something to help you with kiddos who have a sweet tooth as well. I know when my kids were little, they hated it when they saw the sugar bowl coming out because I was getting ready to teach them something about the drink they were drinking. And again, a lot of people say, well, how do you get kids not to drink drinks like that? No, I let mine have it. It wasn't a food war. Not going to be a food war. But you best bet if that Mountain Dew was still sitting there an hour later, it was going away because they're not paying any attention to it. Okay, so I don't know if that's the right strategy or not. It certainly seemed to work well for us. Okay, look at fat in the diet then. 20 to 35% of the calories in your diet. And most people go, wow, that's like a third of my calories. It is, but fat is much more dense than carb and protein in terms of their calories. So it's really not that much fat, and I'm going to give you some examples here in a minute. I want us to talk about essential fatty acids. I've got those to talk about. And then when adding fats, choose to add things like these monounsaturated fats that I'm telling you about here. Okay, so I'm going to take our 170-pound person here, and I'm going to show you, I did the math on her offline using that DRI calculator. It even tells you what your BMI is. So she's a little overweight, comes in and wants to lose some weight. She needs 2,000 calories-ish, right? So if she wants to lose weight, I might put her at 1,700. So if 1,700 is my goal, I take my protein, and she happened to weigh 170 pounds. Again, I showed you earlier that I wanted that person on about 132 grams of protein. If I want her to have about 30% fat in her diet, which is kind of a nice level place to put people, that's 510 calories. You find the grams by dividing fats by 9. So it's 57 grams. That is not a high fat diet at all. Most people would struggle to only eat that much, okay? And so minus protein, minus fat is her carb. I show you here how I calculate the carb. Know that both protein and carbohydrate have 4 calories per gram. That's why those 4s are in there, whereas fat has 9 per gram, okay? So I was worried about whether I would have enough stuff to give you guys today, and we're looking pretty good on time already in terms of 12:44. So I'm going to kind of go through these slides quickly, but you've got the resources in front of you if you decide you want to explore it. And of course, I'm always glad to get emails from colleagues. So you hear a lot about the omega-3 fatty acids being this nice anti-inflammatory fatty acid. What some people don't realize, omega-6 fatty acids also exist in all these fats that we eat. We would like this ratio to be in a great place, 2, 3, 6 or so to 1. So 6 is probably a little high, but omega-6 to omega-3 for this inflammation. It's best to get your omega-3s, which are your DHA and your EPA, from fresh sources, such as eating fatty fish. Some examples of that here, a couple times a week. We live in Central Ohio. It's not very easy to get that kind of fresh fish that we really like all the time without spending some money to get it. So depending on your income, you might be able to do that. The other thing people are doing is taking up the alpha-linolenic acid, the ALA. And if we looked at the biochemistry pathways for these, it starts out as this ALA, and then downstream it becomes the EPA, the DHA. But our body, the DHA is what we want for our brain and for a lot of our anti-inflammatory. So showing you here, these different seeds are good ALA sources. You may not realize it, but you should grind your own. All of these are made out of polyunsaturated fatty acids, and polyunsaturated means that there's a point that can easily be oxidized, and you don't want that oxidation to happen. You don't want the fat, you don't want that seed to start to taste rancid rather. Rancid meaning spoiled, kind of a funny and off taste to it, if you will. You've probably experienced that kind of thing in your oils in the kitchen. Okay, so you want to keep them in an airtight container, grind your own right before you use it, put them in that smoothie if you're going to. Thought it might be good to share a few things about dietary supplements. the Office of Distance Education. That was funny. So the Office of Dietary Supplements for the NIH has a lot of nice fact sheets there. In fact, you can learn more about fish oils there, and it'll give you some information about that. But if you're going to try to get your omega-3s from fish oil pills or from omega-3 pills, you want it to be something that's third-party verified. This USP stands for United States Pharmacopoeia, and it ensures that what's in this bottle is what it says it is, and it's not laced with lead or anything like that, and that it absorbs, it digests in your body, gets absorbed in your body. So it's got some really good assurances with it, if you will. Any vitamin, mineral supplement you want to take, look for this USP verification. Okay, with EPA and DHA in particular, you got to check the label for storage. Some of them need to be kept in the fridge. Some people say if you keep them in the fridge, you don't get the fishy burps as much. And then looking at your dosage, you don't want more than about 2,000 milligrams in a day as a supplement. Okay, so looking at cardiovascular disease prevention, and this comes from the American College of Cardiology website. The dietary pattern, it emphasizes intake of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, healthy protein sources such as low dairy products, low fat poultry without the skin, fish, seafood, and nuts, and non-tropical vegetable oils, and limits the intakes of sugars, sugar-sweetened beverages, and red meats. Okay, this is what they're saying helps us avoid cardiovascular disease. We come here to the high blood pressure slide. You know, the newest guidelines brought those blood pressure thresholds down even a little bit more. So if you're marginally high in your blood pressure and you want to bring it down, there's no doubt that this diet to stop hypertension, the DASH diet is the best diet to use to help you control your hypertension. Again, look at the foods that are on here. There is nothing different about those than the previous slide. And these are the kinds of things that we think doesn't do us more damage. Okay, same information. And so want to talk a little bit on osteoporosis. Again, high genetic load for your blood pressure, high genetic load for your heart disease, high genetic load for osteoporosis, right? And so genetically 60 to 80%. So if you've got mom or grandma in your family that already has osteoporosis, you ought to be considering, what can I do for my bones now? Don't wait until you're in menopause and it's a little bit too late. I wish we could get all young women on the DEXA machine so they knew what their bone health looked like, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. All right, so diet-wise, of course, calcium and vitamin D are important. I've given you some levels here for vitamin D. You want them to be at least 30, but more than likely up around 45 or 50. They do not need to be up at 80 and 100 nanograms per milliliter, okay? And then people often say, what's the best thing for me to do for my bones in terms of osteoporosis? Eating enough, getting enough protein, making sure your calcium and vitamin D are adequate. We've got some other nutrients like vitamin K, phosphorus that are in there, but we typically are doing fine on those. And then to exercise. We want novel impact exercise. Unfortunately, a lot of people say, well, then I'll start running. That's impact, right? Well, it is impact, but it's not novel impact. You're hitting the same way time after time after time, and you're just putting an energy drain on your system. So they're surprised to see that a lot of my research shows that the lumbar spine and the wrist bone density in runners doesn't look as good as it does in an average person who doesn't exercise. Yep, that's what I said. Looking at osteoarthritis then, this will give us a little bit here to look at in terms of anti-inflammatory foods. Think about the lists I shared with you earlier. Same kinds of foods we're talking about. Again, highly anti-inflammatory because of their bright colors in fruits and vegetables. Okay, potassium and magnesium are really important to get in the diet, and that's what we get from our fruits and vegetables as well. So for osteoarthritis, folks need to get their body weight down to a normal place, and they need to be sure they're getting good sleep as well. A lot of research talking about folks who don't get enough sleep have a harder time managing their weight than folks who sleep 7 to 8 hours, good sleep, 7 to 8 hours a night. So sleep quality for somebody that's slightly overweight, typically you'll have a little bit of sleep apnea. That's not good quality sleep. So you want to get those kinds of things corrected medically as you can. This is just a little table here. I've given you the reference for it. So this is Nutrition and Clinical Practice Journal. And again, you can go to that journal. It's free through our library website. And you can find this article and examine this for yourself. But basically, just trying to show you the same stuff. What we do in the standard American diet is not what these people who live a long time and have a high anti-inflammatory diet do. Okay, and then these are just some examples of the kinds of things people are trying these days. Maybe a physician tells them to do some tart cherry juice for their gouty arthritis. Again, you're kind of fighting inflammation with that, as well as some of the active ingredients in it. So I wanted to comment on these spices, turmeric, curcumin. There is a little bit of research showing us that people that take these in a dietary supplement, some might have a liver that doesn't do so well with that. So there are some case studies out there. So know that when you start something new, start one thing new so that if it's not sitting well with your body in some way, you get to learn that, right? But cooking with these things, have at it. Great idea. Okay, and again, some foods that fight inflammation. And what I'm trying to show you, this looks exactly like the list of foods that I showed you earlier and the list of foods that cause inflammation. Okay, so at this point, I do want us to have a little bit of time for some questions. I want to tell you guys, though, you get 3 free nutrition visits with a dietitian each plan year. I've provided through Nicole a list of the practitioners that we have at Ohio State. Not all of those will be ones you can schedule with, but if it's an outpatient facility, you can schedule with them. You don't have to have a physician referral. If you're on OSU's insurance, our insurance covers it completely. So when you meet with me, we're going to meet for an hour the first time and probably 30 or 45 minutes each time after that. And even at that, if you know somebody that's not on OSU insurance, $75 for the hour, $45 for a return visit. Not cost prohibitive, we hope, anyway, right? So there's also this free health coaching that we have, giving you the link here. Be sure that you're accessing that if you'd like to. The faculty, staff, and fitness program is something that sometimes it's a well-kept secret. Doesn't mean to be. Emily Martini over at Exercise Science runs that program, but they would welcome you to come over and learn how to work out. And again, it's not cost prohibitive. There are a lot of discounted physical activity place memberships. Of course, none of those happen to be open at the moment. None of those happen to be open at the moment. But we'll get back to life as we know it, we hope. So again, my clinical stuff listed here for you. I like to use the IDEXA for body composition. When somebody comes to me and they says, I want to lose weight, I would like that weight loss to be fat, not muscle. Sometimes people come to me and I have a guy right now who weighs 220 and I look at him and I go, you do not look like you weigh 220. And so let's get him on the DEXA and let's find out, is it primarily muscle? Because if it is, yay him. Now let's just work at whittling slowly. If he's really that heavy and his BMI at a 31 is really from being that heavy and it's really body fat, then it's a whole different pathway. So you have to have a script from your doc saying IDEXA for body composition and we get you on here for $50. So the RMR, we've already discussed a little bit. This is the phone number for an appointment with me or my colleague, Casey Vavrick, over at the Crane. The number is, Nicole will distribute that handout that has all of our other dietitians listed on it as well. So a lot of resources at Ohio State. So what kind of questions do we have? Unmute yourself there, my friends. Josh, Nicole.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through these real quick. Thanks to everyone who submitted those through the group chat. So we'll go through these one by one. The first one was from Megan. What do you think about individuals trying to lose fat and maintain lean mass and supplementing with protein powder?
I think the first two pieces of that, losing fat and keeping their lean or even adding lean, absolutely doable. If protein powder is your choice about how to do that, then I want my clients to use some kind of a third-party approved protein powder, and I have resources that I can share with you. Megan, if you want to email me, I'm glad to share that handout with you or anybody else for that matter. Third party assures that it has the protein in there that it says it has in there. A lot of games going on with dietary supplements right now. You could be taking a protein powder that doesn't have much protein in it at all and not know the difference.
Absolutely. Next question is from Tanya. She asked a question about the fat disorder lipedema. And if you have heard of that, what is your thoughts and any ideas on diets to follow?
Yeah, I got to tell you that one's beyond the scope of what I typically practice. Sorry to say that, but better than blowing smoke at you. You know, I would suggest that you meet with one of my outpatient colleagues that practice either over at Morehouse. Probably going to be your best shot on that one. So Liz Wynandy comes to mind, any of those folks over there.
This is great. The next two, I'm going to kind of couple these two together. Thoughts on the keto diet and intermittent fasting?
Man, I knew I wasn't going to get away from that one. So I may be different than many folks who are practicing right now, and I will tell you that I'm going to answer it the way Jackie feels. That does not represent how Ohio State or some of my fellow practitioners feel. If I've tried a normal mixed diet with somebody and it's not working for them, if it's a person with metabolic syndrome where you have a bigger belly, you're carrying more of your body fat centrally and your legs are really pretty thin and defined, that's a person with metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance. I've used keto with folks to a great amount of success to help them. Now, Jeff Bolick is also on our campus. He is a professor over in exercise science. He does a lot of studies on this. So there is evidence to stand behind both of these diets. Is it the same amount of evidence that we have in some of these more balanced diets? Probably not. I agree with that, but it doesn't mean that we should just throw it out and not use it for an individual. I have not done much counseling with intermittent fasting. I need to do some more reading on that before I'm going to be comfortable doing that. Some of the early stuff that came out didn't come out the way that I would like to see it come out if we're going to use that with folks. But bottom line is anything that helps you keep your calories in a more fixed, a little bit lower place is going to help you lose weight. And there are studies showing that regardless of what you've used. Somebody that wants to keto, I would probably keto them for a good 6 weeks or so, depending on how their weight loss is going. Once they reach their weight loss goal, I'm going to graduate them back to the amount of carbohydrate that their body will tolerate. So putting some dairy, some fruit, and some whole grains back into their diet. I didn't say bread. I agree, white bread, you got to be careful with things that are highly processed. Use whole grains anytime that you're going to eat grains.
Good. Next question here is thoughts or recommendations on dieting or diet plans from post-surgery or injury.
Yeah, absolutely needs to be an anti-inflammatory diet, but it needs to be enough calories to help you heal. That is not a time to be trying to lose weight. And I feel strongly about that. Your tissues need to heal, and to do that, they've got to have the building blocks to heal. There's even a fair amount of folks who are eating pre-surgery to prepare for surgery and then eating right up to surgery. So this is going to be a new era in this way, talking about how we eat around surgery. But without a doubt, protein sufficient on the front side, knowing that your body's in a good place in terms of not being malnourished. And then on the backside, enough protein and enough calories to be sure that you're allowing your body to heal. Eating all the fruits and vegetables, veggies any way that you can in terms of a lot of antioxidant power. You want your body to heal.
And this is the last question. I know that people, I'll submit all these questions to you if you don't mind, Jackie, if you don't mind answering. But this is the last question that we have for time. You mentioned the idea of 130 for carbs. Can you please speak the difference between simple carbs and complex carbs? And second question, would eating a lot of fruit cause high triglycerides?
So I think the second question is an easy pick for me. So just let me say, everybody's an individual. And for some people, eating a lot of fruit might be too high sugar in the diet. However, I don't think we talk about it like that. We say, eat your fruits and veggies, 9 a day, 9 servings of fruits and vegetables combined. I don't care if that's 3 fruits and 6 veggies, 4 and 5, however you want to split that. But no doubt, eating more complex carbohydrate is better for us than adding these simple sugars. I think it's surprising to people with fruits to see how much sugar's not actually in them. Look them up and find out how many grams and do the teaspoon thing with them so that you can see what that looks like. Fruits have different glycemic index as well, so some hit our system a little faster than others. You're an individual. If you're a person that's struggling with carbohydrate overall, then let's see what we can do to get the glycemic index in your overall diet down. But yes, it could, in theory, cause somebody to have high triglycerides. Of that 130 grams, I would like all of that to be complex carbohydrate. Now, is that doable for everybody? No, limit the added sugars best you can. A lot of the old intuition said less than 10% of your calories. Some of the new stuff says less than 25%. I think less than 25% is too high. Too high. So 130, maybe 15 of those or so as simple sugar if you're just doing 130. 130 is pretty low. But your body doesn't know the difference between the sugar and the complex carbohydrate in terms of making our blood sugar from it. Does it hit our system faster because it's simple? Yes, that's an insulin resistance issue. That's a different thing.
All right. Before we go over 1 second, Nicole. I had some questions. Just for everyone, if you did not register through Link to Health, and you have access through Link to Health, if you can just go back to Link to Health and register for the webinar, I greatly appreciate it, and we'll be able to get that email out to you. If you do not have access to Link to Health, no worries. Please email me, winn.50@osu.edu, and I'll make sure you're on that email. Without further ado, Nicole.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. That was a great presentation. And looking at all the questions and comments, people really enjoyed it. Lots of good information. Like Josh said, we'll be sending out follow-up email with some of the answers to these questions, as well as a evaluation. If you guys would please take a couple minutes to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you so much, Jackie, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Be well, everyone.
Bye, everyone. All right.
Cool.
We had 122.
That's great.
Excellent.
That go all right for you guys too?
Yes, that went perfect. Thank you so much.
All right.
I don't know if you're able to see, the group chat or the chat at all, but a lot of positive feedback from this. So this is excellent to see.
We're getting
where would I see that,
Josh?
Yeah, people can still hear. You can listen all you want. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, if you go into the group chat, it's at the bottom. There's a big chat button.
Thanks, Jackie, Deborah, for letting us know that everybody could see us, but it's no big deal. We're just enjoying it. Anybody that wants to hang, I'd still answer questions, but I guess that's probably shouldn't make it longer than an hour.
Yeah, if you have time, I don't have anything to, for now. So it's completely up to your schedule there, Jackie.
Yeah.
If anyone has any further questions, you can turn on your mic and go ahead and ask away.
I'm laughing at BUNCO1's comment about being thin and people thinking it's okay to say that. We would never walk up to somebody that's heavy and say, I hate you, you're so fat. So anyway, it's a good point. So I wonder if lipedema was supposed to be lymphedema on Tanya's. Yeah, I think we hit most of those.
Yeah, there was just a couple. A couple personal questions. Which comes with the territory. So.
Sure it does. Is Soldavini still on here? Oh, I'll answer these in.
Yeah, I'll copy these for you. And track kind of the ones that we've already asked, and before we send that out, before we send out that follow-up email, I can get those answers.
Yeah, I'm glad to do that. So thanks, guys. I've enjoyed it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, like Nicole said, we send out a follow-up evaluation, so we can send that information out to you as well.
Sounds good.
All right. Nicole, if you want to stay on for a little bit, we can. But everyone else, we will see you later.
Awesome.